Good morning or afternoon, evening, whatever time it is when you're watching this. Welcome to another Shamanic Coffee Hour. Um, I usually take a few moments before I jump right in. It can take people, 7 minutes or so to jump on who are interested in watching the streaming. So I like to wait kind of a couple minutes. Not that you should. Oh, good morning. See, our first joiner is here. Good morning. Um, Today, I want to talk about finding your spiritual truth, finding your unique path. This is a really important topic, and it's something that a lot of people who reach out to me have questions about. I think I teach shamanism, and I'm not saying shamanism is everybody's path. We don't proselytize like that. Good morning. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining. I hope everybody has their and good morning to you as well. So lots of good mornings. Good morning to everybody. Um, so I'm talking today about, and I hope your beverage of choice this morning. I'm drinking Pete's coffee out of my Hustle Juice mug. Um, so I'm talking about finding your own spiritual path, your unique path. And I was just saying that though I have a path, I have my own path. I practice and teach shamanism. I never ever say that that path is for everybody. It's not. It's absolutely not. And you don't have to even be interested in shamanism to tune into these things or um I try to make the things I talk about. I mean, I do sometimes I'll do just a kind of a background talk about shamanism or something, but normally I try to make these a little broader for people to be somewhat inclusive. So I am not going to prescribe anybody's spiritual path, anybody's unique path today, because who would I be to do that? I'm nobody's guru, nothing like that. I'm not a direct representative to source for you. You are the direct representative to source for you. So I want to talk about why it's important to find your path and sort of some different ideas about it. I'm happy to hear input, take questions. I'll answer questions I can answer. Um, but if anybody has ideas, feel free to share them. But let's talk about your unique path. So in Sanskrit, the word dharma comes to mind. Dharma is like the way, and dharma is used variously amongst different spiritual groups. It does mean your spiritual path, right? The spiritual way, the dharma, in some ways it reflects the teachings that you're studying, particularly in Buddhism, right? In Buddhism, you take refuge in the Buddha. When you become a Buddhist, you take refuge in the Buddha, you take refuge in the Sangha, the gathering, the people that are around you, and you take refuge in the Dharma, which is the teachings and practices. But Dharma also has a more generic thing, and it means sort of your life path, the thing, the spiritual path that you are supposed to be on. There's another term I like and use sometimes, and that is true will is another phrase I like. And not that I'm not Crowleyan or anything, but the infamous Aleister Crowley in the Book of the Law, that he, according to himself and stories, was a received teaching from a particular spirit, um, wrote, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding about that phrase. People read that sometimes and think that means I get to do whatever I want, right? Do what thou wilt, do what I want. But that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about following your true path, your spiritual path, thing that you are cut out for, right? So there are all of these concepts about things like, some of these are new ideas and metaphors, which is really the only way you can describe. Like the word path is a metaphor; it's not a physical path necessarily. Um, so we have to sort of describe this in metaphors. So um will is sort of a metaphor as well. It's about finding your way, finding your true path, finding the thing that you're supposed to be doing. So kind of newer terms might be things like soul contract. And I don't know enough about that stuff. People and I'm not saying any of, no mean I don't mean ever to put anything down or anybody's spiritual beliefs, but frequently people will start talking to me in very new age terms and concepts, and I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't know what 5D. I know 5D stands for the fifth dimension. I don't know what that is or where that comes from. People mention that to me. People mention numerology to me. Yes, love is the law is also the second part. Um, and yeah, again, it's a different concept of love. It's not romantic love, it's spiritual love is the idea. um the word and I think um there's a numeric correspondence between the word thelema, which is what Crowley titled his religious movement, his spiritual movement, thelema, which is, I think, a Greek word that means will. It in it the numerically through gematria, and I'm not an expert. It adds up to 93, and then the word that they use for love, I don't know if it was agape or something, some Greek term for love, also adds up to 93. So the idea with gematria is you find words that have equal numerical values, and they are somehow related. People who practice gematria try to figure out those connections. Again, I'm not an expert in that stuff. I know a little bit here and there. But yes, the second part of that is uh love is the law, but then the third part is love under will, right? Meaning love as you're following your true path. Yeah, Crowley is a very controversial figure, rightly so. He was not a very nice man. Started a lot of conflicts with people, could easily be accused of abusing lots of people, and but also pushed a lot of ideas that most people don't even know influence everything from popular culture today. To um, haven't read anything with Crowley in 30 years. Yeah, his stuff can be challenging, right? Unless you're really studied in the occult. One of the things was he was a real polymath. He went to India and studied Buddhism and yoga, and he went to, traveled and read extensively and was a member of the original Golden Dawn in London. There's a funny story. Um, I think it was the poet Yeats, who was also a member, got into a fight. Crowley tried to take over, was like running up the stairs of the temple dressed as a Highlander, like full kilt and stuff. And William Butler Yeats and a couple of other members actually kicked him down the stairs of the temple in London. Uh, so just, yeah, some funny stuff there. Anyway, I think it's funny, but um yeah, so there is a darkness, and he embraced that. So Crowley, so talking of past, so Crowley's stuff is considered by most people what they call left hand path. So and this might be an important distinction to make when thinking about your own spiritual path. Um, these are fairly new terms, probably maybe 100 years old, not much older than that, or it could be younger than that. But with what's called left hand path and right hand path. Um, Ostensibly, these mean left hand path means is a very individualistic approach to spirituality. It's about personal evolution. It's about sort of becoming your own God, for lack of a better term. Right hand path spirituality is about sort of taking your place with God. It's about more. It's more of a unifying path, and I'm not placing weight on either one of those. I think there are, there's also the middle path that embraces both of those things. So, some examples of left-hand path stuff are the Agora. I think it's Aghora in India, and these are essentially tantric asceticists. Like, you see these guys walking around and they're dirty, their hair's matted, they're naked, they walk around naked, all the time. They don't wear clothes. They don't have homes. They live either in caves or in mountains, and there are plenty of agora still today. Like, it's not, a thing. And sometimes they'll live in charnel grounds, which are funerary grounds where they burn bodies and stuff. And they do all these things that are considered um, unclean or dark by the major thrust of culture, the culture that they live in. And there's reasons for it. It involves understanding that this all this physical growth, they understand, as they understand it, this gross physical matter is to be transcended, and so they meditate all the time. They eat foods that they're stories of cannibalism, all kinds of stuff, right? With them, eating. I don't want to be too gross this morning. Eating feces and things like that. There's all kind. You can find more information. There are female agoras, um, as well. They don't walk around naked. That part, whatever their sect is. I believe they follow Shiva, but whatever their sect is. And then there are ceremonies or holidays or celebrations or whatever, where the men dress as women. And again, it's about they're breaking cultural taboos. And that's very left hand path stuff. It's about individualistic breaking the bonds of cultural conditioning that we all live in. And I think that most people have some impulse to do that to some extent, break certain cultural bonds, certain cultural rules. And that doesn't have to mean like you go out and murdering people or something like that. It just means that you recognize that there's the culture is trying to condition you. So with Crowley, he played up a lot of he called himself the Beast, 666 the Beast, and he was on newspapers and magazines. He was I would say, one of the first probably people in the world to really ride negative publicity for the sake of fame. He loved it. He loved the limelight. And certainly could be said that he had a very inflated ego, a sense of self-importance. Um, but you can also not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and read some of his stuff. I find some of it interesting. I don't claim to understand all of it. The Book of the Law is very interesting to me. It takes a little bit of translation, I guess, interpretation, because there are a lot of Egyptian gods and goddesses and things like that mentioned in there that you know um, don't necessarily mean something to somebody who hasn't studied that. So, but it's important in you know I think my take is it's important to find your own spiritual truth, finding your path. We all have a unique path. We all have something that we're cut out for, via our, if you want to say soul contracts or karma or our DNA, I don't know, our you know, our experience, right? So for me, I came into shamanism as a way to deal with trauma, with PTSD. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, and had no idea that shamanism. Like I just knew, I just knew that this was the path. I felt a calling. Actually, heard I heard a voice. That's a pretty obvious. I'm a little dense sometimes, so sometimes spirit has to speak very loudly to wake me up, to shake me loose, to shake things up for me. So I was, meditating one day, and I heard a very loud, very forceful voice that sounded like it was coming from outside of me, sounded like somebody standing in front of me say, you need to learn shamanism. That was the exact phrase. That was it. And then I was like, what? I don't even know what that word means really. And I live in Maine. How on earth am I going to learn shamanism? I can't. I have kids and a job. I can't go to Peru. I can't go to Mongolia or Siberia or northern Norway or whatever. Dense and stubborn. Yeah. So there's a certain aspect to that. We're birds of a feather in that regard. Um, uh, yeah. So there, I have I have this, I don't know what you want to call it, sort of a saying, an aphorism, this thing that I call a slap in the face with a wet fish by the universe. So in this idea is that when there's something that spirit wants you to pay attention to, um sometimes that's your path, sometimes it's your spiritual path, and you're ignoring it. If you're like me, you ignore it, ignore it, ignore it, ignore it. Spirit turns the volume up, turns the volume up, turns the volume up. Finally, um what will happen is, uh, if you ignore it long enough, what will happen is some kind of crisis. It might not be severe, or it could be extremely severe. It could be life threatening. It could be a psychological crisis. It could be an illness. This is very common in shamanic cultures, right? People who are chosen to train as a shaman have uh, been struck by lightning, had a near death experience, had a long-term illness with mysterious recovery. There is this idea sort of about the shamanic descent into the lower world to gather up, and into the realm of the dead, shall we say. The lower world isn't, in my cosmogony, is not the where the dead go. I realize that for people who practice Norse religion, that's hell, not hell in the Christian concept, but the realm of the dead, one of the realms of the dead. You only get to go to Valhalla if you die in battle and you were particularly brave. But there are other places you can go to, after you die. But generally people go down to the underworld, and that was true for the Greek pagans and all kinds. So but that's not, the shamanic lower world is different than that, but there's a descent, right? And I like Star Wars a whole lot, ever since I was a kid. And George Lucas studied the work of Joseph Campbell, who wrote, the Hero with a Thousand Faces, and wrote about sort of comparative mythology, saying this hero's journey is the same. Like there's the same elements across every culture. So there's something very archetypal about that. And so Lucas followed the arc of the hero's journey for the first three Star Wars movies, which were actually 4, 5, and 6, the ones that came out in the 70s and early 80s. Um, there's the arc of the hero's journey there. And lots of stuff written about it. You can um, find it. But to me, the hero's journey is a allegory of shamanic initiation because it involves things like crisis, finding a teacher, coming out of it, returning to ordinary reality. There's a leaving of ordinary reality and then a return to ordinary reality. But when the hero returns to ordinary reality, they have new learning, new abilities, new power to share, to help the people, right? So it's the story of Luke Skywalker, right? He becomes a Jedi, and he goes in Empire Strikes Back. I'm gonna get real nerdy here, sorry. In Empire Strikes Back, he goes into he's hanging out with Yoda, and Yoda sends him down into, I guess it's a cave or below tree roots or whatever it is, a hole in the ground where, it's the whole thing where he says, "I'm not afraid." And Yoda says, "You will be." And he goes down and Darth Vader's there and he takes out his lightsaber and they fight and he slays Darth Vader and Darth Vader's face mask blows off and it's Luke Skywalker underneath it. Um, and this is about fighting your own demons. This is about going down. This allegory of going into the underworld is going inward into the shadow and facing these parts of yourself. It's not meant to be literal. That's why it's allegory. That's why it's story, told through story. But it, to me, replicates um, what I know of shamanic initiation, that there is this descent into the depths of the self to confront those things. But rather than fight them, the approach that I take is to become allied with them. There's a practice in Tibetan Buddhism called Chod, Chod, with an like an umlaut. I don't know if they call it an umlaut over the O. And in that practice, it's a complex meditative practice. In that practice, one meditates imagining uh, feeding their own body, using your own body to feed, your demons, feeding your demons, right? Your demons are not external. They're not out here in the world. They're not these external forces. They are internal. They're these forces in our shadow, these forces of, that want to keep us from evolving because it feels safe to stay where we are. Um, so homeostasis is the word I'm looking for. The self-regulation, keeping things in check. Your body has homeostasis if it's working correctly, right? You maintain a constant body temperature, and you go in and out of that, but your body works to maintain sort of the same state all the time, the same relative pH levels, the same relative. Um, so I hear people talking about, uh, I don't really get it, but some of it sounds untrue to me. This whole eating I don't know if that's a thing anymore. Eating alkaline foods or alkalinization um, uh, is a strange thing to me because they talk about, oh, you're going to change the pH of your body. You can't. You would die. Your pH of your body exists within a very, very narrow range. So I don't really understand it, uh, but that was a whole thing, drinking alkaline water and whatever. I'm like, doesn't that go into your stomach where you have hydrochloric acid and get neutralized no matter how alkaline it is? I mean, you can eat Tums, right? If you have heartburn or whatever, you can eat these things. They're basic salts, so they are meant to counteract, the acid that's causing heartburn or whatever. I'm drinking my highly acidic coffee this morning. Anyway, so yeah, so there's left hand path, which and there's all kinds of stuff in the middle, and there are people who sort of combine both things. Um, you know, there is personal evolution, and that is sort of left hand path ish. Um, but there is also this sort of seeking non-duality, seeking union with the divine, and that's very right-hand path. It's sort of the path of the mystic, right? The mystic seeks to be absorbed in divinity, where the left-hand path seeks to take on the qualities of divinity. I think the both paths wind up in the same place eventually. They're just different approaches. And so people, the old saying goes, there are many paths to the mountaintop, right? But everyone's going to the same top of the mountain. It might be helpful. Yeah, I don't know. Again, it might be helpful for acid reflux, but some of the stuff, and again, I don't know about it, but some of the stuff I've heard is just false. You can't change the pH of your body chemistry. You can't change the pH of your blood outside of a very limited range. You die. That that's just the way physiology works. Yeah, maybe it can help if you have certain digestive issues. I can certainly understand that. When I've read things about alkaline diet, they're like, yeah, eat lots of green leafy vegetables. Well, that's just healthy. Like that's just good for you in general, right? And there are lots of reasons for that. Um, and maybe the alkaline aspect of that helps with some digestive issues, maybe. But you're also getting fiber. You're getting, lots of phytochemicals from your green leafy vegetables. So eat your vegetables. Uh, so seeking out your own path is not it's not just a matter of choosing what sounds cool. And so a lot of people ask me the question. People who reach out to me, like, I'm feeling pulled towards shamanism, which is why people reach out to me generally, because um because that's what I teach. You could reach out to me about Judaism, but I'm going to refer you to my friend who's a rabbi, right? So people feel a pull and they say, how do I know this is my path? And I'm like, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. You can tell you that. If you're feeling a pull, there's a reason for that. If you're feeling a pull, it means that there's some part of spirit that wants you to at least explore this. This isn't to say that it's going to be your one true path necessarily, but you might discover it. As a youth in my 20s in college, I studied and practiced tantric Buddhism, for for a couple of years, and I thought that was my path. Um, but there were things about it that didn't ever quite resonate with me, and again, like, could be your path, and that's totally fine. I want everybody to find whatever their own path is. Um, but then when I came to shaman, I've practiced all kinds of things, meditation, hypnotherapy, um, you know, uh, I still to this day sometimes practice tantric Buddhist rituals. I have a tanka of Vajrakilaya, who's a very fearsome Buddhist deity hanging up, and what they call wrathful deities. And again, like, that's sort of a little bit left hand path stuff, because the meditations involve taking on the God form, right? The meditations involve very complex meditations, involve visualizing yourself in the middle of this mandala with certain gods and other beings around you, chanting really long mantras, and imagining yourself as this deity, essentially having sex with this deity's consort. And there are whole lots of, you could read encyclopedias, like, 30 volumes about just this one practice, this one deity's practice. Is very complicated stuff. And I will, once in a while, I will practice it, to go back a little bit. But I've also practiced Western esotericism. I've studied Scandinavian folk magic. I've, you name it. I'm a lifelong learner, as most people are, who who study and practice. But shamanism is my path. When I start out in shamanism, I'm like, oh, this feels like home to me. This feels like where I belong. And so I think, if I can give a couple practical pointers about discovering your path, right? Now, there's nothing, a lot of people have this idea that whatever you land on first should be your life path, right? People are, again, people reach out to me. I'm feeling a pull towards shamanism. How do I know that this is my path? And my answer to that is I can't tell you. Only you can tell you, and there will be a moment where it will either be your path or it won't. But there's nothing wrong with studying it for a while. If you're feeling a pull, that's the first sign. If you start doing it and you say, "Oh, this is what I want to do for the, rest of my life," we'll keep going with it and see if it doesn't spit you out. Shamanism will literally chew you up and spit you out spiritually. And if you can get through that and realize that it makes you stronger, more healed, able to help other people, that sort of thing, then maybe it's your path. But if you do shamanism for a while and you're like, your interest kind of wanes and you want to look at something else, there's nothing wrong with that. So, as I mentioned before, I have a friend who's a rabbi, and once in a while I'll chat with her about uh, Judaism specifically because she's an expert. And you know, she was talking about she was one time she was counseling somebody who was converting to Judaism. And I don't, people do that. I don't know how often, but people convert to everything all the time. And by the way, I know lots of Jewish Buddhists as well. Those things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Um, but she was counseling somebody, a woman who was going through the conversion process, and I don't know what's involved with the conversion process, but and she said, she asked the person, um, what was it that made them want to convert? Like, why did they want to convert to Judaism? And she just, her answer was something along the lines of, this just feels right. This feels like what I need to be doing. I just resonate with this form of spirituality, this religion. And, it was, certainly an acceptable answer. It was to my friend, and call it definitely an acceptable answer. So you need to find something you resonate with. You have to be careful a little bit because there are in spirituality, there are plenty of unscrupulous actors, and um, one of the ways that they use to get followers that they can take advantage of is to make those people feel really good up front, and then they take things away from you after you get sort of locked in. So talking about what we might consider destructive or dangerous cult-like situations, where there may be abuse or theft or whatever, all kinds of things. So you have to be a little bit careful about that. But if you feel like, oh, really resonates with me, maybe that is your path. And again, you can change your path 1,000 times in your lifetime before you find the true one, and then that's fine. Everything I have ever learned practically comes into play when I'm practicing shamanism or I'm teaching shamanism. So things that I've learned about ritual in Western esoteric practice, things I've learned about, shamanism has this ritual called opening the directions. Some people call it calling in the directions. Um, but I have an understanding of that from practicing a ritual from the Golden Dawn, that is a little bit different. practicing the lesser banish. It's called the LBRP, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram. They're very there are similarities, and having practiced both, I can, when I'm teaching, it gives me a different understanding. When I'm practicing, it helps me do things in a way that is more empowering, I guess, for myself, when I'm practicing. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, even if you had a bad experience um, with a form of spirituality or religion. There's something to be taken from it. Growing up, when I was little, I went to Sunday school with my grandmother, who was quite religious, and learned a bit about the Bible and Christianity and stuff. And I don't identify as a Christian now, but it does help me understand a lot of things, right? It helps me, um, you know, some of the stories of the Bible I think are good and important. I think Christianity right now feels like there are there are many, many factions, there are many, many sects of Christianity, but it feels like there are people who want to um, push it down because what they see are these really vocal people who are very political, who want to, take people's rights away, who want to oppress women and gay people and things like that. I think that's a really small minority. I don't think that is most people, at least not in the US. That might be in some other places, but I have been to churches. I have, when I was married, the minister who performed my wedding um uh was gay. She was a friend of ours. I mean, is gay, but the she performed my wedding ceremony as a friend of mine, and she was open with her church, and they were great and accepting of her. And there are churches who are very much the face of social justice in the places where they are. So, um, again, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater necessarily, or place too broad a strokes on any, very large group of people. Are there people out there who are bigoted because of their religion, or believe that their spirituality is the only true spirituality for everyone? Absolutely, yeah, and that's true in just about anything. You know, um, we have that also in politics and sports teams and whatever. It's just tribalism, just petty tribalism. Your true path is not about tribalism. It's not about I am tribalism is about I am going to replace part of my self-esteem with a group identity. I'm going to feel good about myself because I was born in the country I was born in, or because I'm the race I am, or because I am a member of the religious body that I am, or whatever. Um, and that makes me better than people who are not. Right? That is why there is some amount of left hand path practice that gets woven into most people's spiritual path. That's the self work. That's the stuff you do to work on yourself, is left hand path frequently. It's about personal evolution. It's about that focus. It's critical, right? It's critical to look at that. It's critical to look at ourselves somewhat objectively. Um, I'm sort of always examining what I'm doing, how I'm talking about things over time. Like you could probably find videos of things where, years ago I may have talked about something in a way that I talk about differently now, because I've learned more. I've learned how to express things differently. It's not that necessarily I was wrong. I don't love the right and wrong approach to things like that. It's just that I've found different ways to express myself that sometimes, hopefully, fingers crossed, come across better. I learn over time. I learn from talking to folks like you folks, and I learn from teaching my students. Gosh, I learn so much from my students. A teacher should be able to learn from their students, in my opinion. I always tell my students, I'm a guide, I'm not a guru. You don't come to me for answers. You come to me to guide you through experiences. I'm going to show you how to get your own answers. Um, I have a new student, and this is something that has happened with lot, a number of students that I teach. I teach mostly primarily one-on-one these days. I mostly teach through mentorship, and so I have a new student, and she asked if I would perform a healing ceremony on her, because I do that with clients. And my answer to that was, I'm going to hold off on that because, as a student, as opposed to a client who comes to see me like once or twice or three times, um, a student I'm building a relationship with, and I'm teaching them to do their own work. And so, what I will say is, look, if this is something that you continue to struggle with for a long time, we can talk about that. But my goal is to empower you to do your own work, and that includes healing work, includes working on yourself from a healing perspective. And that's way more powerful than if you had to come to me. What am I teaching you if you can't do your own healing work? So, I don't have the time, energy, or attention to create dependent relationships with my students. They come to me because I have things that I can guide them through, but then they go off and do their own work, right? We don't create this um, guru disciple kind of worship relationship or anything like that. I'm not, I'm not, I, I'm not worthy of that, and that's not something I desire. Who's I don't understand who's got the time for that. I realize people do that, but the way that I work one-on-one with students, I guess if I had, it's not even my realm of consciousness really to really think about that. Not something I want, not something I ever want. Um, I just like talking to people. I just like being a normal dude who's flawed and um, makes mistakes and stumbles and chokes on my coffee sometimes when I'm trying to talk to y'all. I live up north and I still say y'all sometimes. I spent a lot of time in Texas when I was younger, so sometimes I say y'all. I don't often say all y'all. That was one. All y'all could be plural. Y'alls is plural. All y'all is definitely plural. But y'all can be singular. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you you probably don't live in the US, and it's a southern thing, very popular in Texas to say, instead of saying you, to say y'all, short for you all. But sometimes people say all y'all means all of you, all of you all. I don't say that very often. Anyway, so why, why is it so important to find your own path? Because this is when you're on your path, and this is what happened to me when I took up the study of shamanism, is that spirit has your back. Spirit always has your back, but it's like you're sailing with the wind behind your sails as opposed to turning your ship directly into the wind, right? It's like operating on all cylinders. Okay, things will come very naturally. Your spiritual progression will become rapid. You will have, you may have like huge leaps forward in understanding, awakening experiences. You also may go through initiations, which I'll talk about I'll go through initiation in a whole other talk because it's a big topic. But initiation is rough. True spiritual initiation is not a ceremony. Like, yes, you can be initiated into a spiritual group or practice. Real initiation on the spiritual level is always done by spirit. There may be a ceremony or ritual involved with it. I went through 2 years of initiatory training, in which it was like ceremony after ceremony after ceremony after ceremony, and all of this practice and preparation, and um, lots of simulated death experiences and that sort of thing. And that is to reconfigure your spiritual makeup to make you stronger. But spirit to initiate you sometimes needs to break you down. And it sounds really rough. You know, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do, if spirit loves me, why am I going through this physical crisis, or this health crisis, or this financial crisis, or whatever crisis you're going through? Why me? Why does all of this bad stuff happen to me? Well, if I'm not the mouthpiece for God, but in my experience, oftentimes you're going through that crisis so that you can be rebuilt. Think about this. If you were going to, I've got a lawnmower, and, wasn't functioning. And what did I need to do to get that thing, to get it to function? Well, I needed to take part of the engine apart, right? I needed to take the carburetor off and clean that, and take the air filter off and clean that, and check the fuel lines and check the spark plug and all these things. So um, I had to break the engine down, not completely, right? If I completely took the engine apart, like, used a saw to cut the seams of the welds and all this stuff, I probably wouldn't get it back together. So it might feel like things are completely breaking down for you, but there is an unbroken part of you. Oh, you understand the Southern lingo. No worries. Um, approached by an elder who asked if she could give a message from Graham. She described her and then said, Graham told her, I walk with the dead. She offered to mentor me, unsure because of false teachers. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You have to use your discernment. You have to use your judgment. It can be hard because you want some teachers, some really good teachers are not very much out in the public eye, right? They're not, you can't necessarily Google them or that sort of thing. Um, my own shamanic teacher, who I, spent the better part of 7 years with, um, is fairly well known to this day. She's retired from teaching, but is a well-known practitioner, with uh, clients and students from all over the world. And um, you know uh, you can find information about her. You can find things that her students have written. And and the thing is, not every teacher is going to be loved by every student. My teacher, uh, she one of the things I liked about studying with her is she did what we call keeping a tight circle, meaning you didn't, when you were in circle with her, or even when you weren't in circle with her, but you were part of one of her teaching cohort, um, she you basically didn't step out of line. You didn't get to ruin the experience for other people. You didn't, whatever. That being said, she's very loving and gentle and supportive, and I absolutely love her dearly. Yeah, it's a good point. Sometimes following a false teacher can be helpful, right? You can learn the wrong way, so you go the right way. Yeah, sure. Yes, there's a funny thing in the legal profession, intellectual property. I got this from a friend of mine who's an intellectual property lawyer. There's something called the doctrine of negative know-how, and a company's intellectual property might involve all of the wrong ways that they tried to do something, right? So if you worked for Apple, for example, and you knew that, they went through 50 iterations of the iPhone and none of them worked, until they got to the right one, you would have a lot of knowledge about what not to do. And that and so you could actually try to claim that as intellectual property, right? The understanding of what doesn't work. It's kind of I don't know if how easy it is or hard to pursue that legally, but um never met her. You do see spirits and have been studying mediumship on your own. Yeah. Um and the questioning if this person has been put in your path for a reason. And yes. And not to, this is not a psychic or whatever prediction for you, but everybody is put in your path for a reason, in my opinion. Everybody. People who hurt you, people who love you, people who teach you, people who rip you off, people who are all put in your path for learning. That's what we're here to do. So I would say this person is put in your path for a reason, but it's up to you to figure out what that reason is, right? Is it meant for you to become a student of this person? I don't know. I would my my bit of advice is to you know understand safe boundaries, study with someone for a little while, particularly an individual teacher, before making the decision to make huge life leaps, for example, right? Like, um, I wouldn't go join a cult without knowing what all of the teachings were, or that sort of thing, right? And I wouldn't join a religion, for example, without knowing their doctrine and dogma. Um, and shamanism, I didn't know 100%. It was my path. I was like, I'm going to check this out. And I found my teacher. And then she interviewed me in her office for about 3 hours before she would accept me as a student. She, so again, I would, proceed with discernment, with caution. And if this is a person who's going to teach you what not to do, you take that as a learning experience. Um, and there have definitely been people put in my path um, to teach me things, and the lessons have been very hard and unpleasant. And at the time, I didn't see what they were. Now, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. Okay, this person came into my life to re-traumatize me so I could understand there were parts of me that I still needed to work on. Um, so I could go back and do my work on those parts. And can I be grateful? Here's a spiritual power move, right? A spiritual power move. Can you be grateful for the people who hurt you? That doesn't mean, hey, thanks, hurt me again. Doesn't mean you need to let them back in your life. Hey, thanks for the PTSD, but thank you for showing me where I have healing to do. Thank you for teaching me the negative lessons. So, it's a really good point. Thank you for that. Following the false, or I don't even know what to say about if teaching is false, but um, second guessing because she told me she's never taken a student. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's an interesting thing. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to. Absolutely, it's not for me to tell you what to do, but definitely, it's a good idea to be cautious. Um, Teaching and doing are two different things. And I um, did not teach until I had training specifically in teaching. And not to say there's teacher training in everything, there isn't. And someone can be really, really good at something and not be able to teach it. I've experienced that in other realms in my life. Um, but yeah, I mean, I took, I stud my teacher taught me how to teach intro to shamanism classes. And so I started teaching intro to shamanism, and then I did um, 2 years of teacher training before I started teaching like taking on mentees. And I haven't done an apprenticeship yet. I may at some point in my life and my career do an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship is a huge undertaking, not just for the apprentices, but for the person who's teaching an apprenticeship. Very large undertaking. My teacher has, all kinds of systems for doing, had all kinds of systems for doing that, and she had venues for teaching that she had arrangements with, and she had uh, an assistant. I don't have an assistant. Someday maybe I'll have an assistant. I'd like even a virtual assistant to like help me answer correspondence and stuff like that. I'm sometimes not really great at that stuff, but it's okay to second guess. And it's okay to ask questions. What would teaching look like? What would the commitment be like? What is the cost? Is there a cost to it? If there's not a cost, if there's not a monetary cost, if somebody is teaching something for free, there always should be some kind of exchange, right? It doesn't have to be monetary. And I've had people say, oh, can you teach me for free? And I would love to do that. I love nothing more than teaching. And this is the way I do that. This is the way that I teach for free, is that I come on and do live things. I've got a class coming up at the end. Like, I do free classes often through Learn It Live, but I can't take a mentorship is a huge time and energy commitment for me. And I'm not independently wealthy, unfortunately. Maybe someday, who knows? I don't know how that'll happen. Some long lost relative leaves me a mansion or something. Unlikely. Unlikely that I'll ever be independently wealthy. And that's not what it's about. I'm not certainly getting rich off my students, but I have to eat. I have to buy coffee. Trust me, this is a necessary spiritual tool. Sorry, I'm a little bit hoarse this morning. I don't know. I slept with the window open last night, so it could be a pollen thing. Thank you, trees. Thank you, grass. Thank you, goldenrod, and everything else. But yeah, it's okay to be cautious with a teacher. And if this person has never taught anybody before, it doesn't mean they're not going to be a good teacher or a good fit for you. In spirituality, if you're going to study with a teacher, particularly in a one-on-one thing, and I tell this to people who come to me and say, I'm really interested in mentoring with you. Lots of people come to me after watching a YouTube video or after listening to my podcast. And I have an app that people sometimes download that has a ton of information in it. It actually, links out to my podcast and my YouTube channel, and it sort of gathers everything together, or they've read stuff I've written, or, whatever. And they're like, I'm really interested in teaching with you or learning with you, mentoring with you. And, that's great. It's very flattering, and thank you. But I always want to make sure that it's going to be a good fit, and that's mutual, right? So I meet with potential students and talk with them about their interest and understanding. They get to ask me any questions they want. I'm an completely open book. And then if they're still potentially interested, I go through the nuts and bolts and describe how mentoring works. And it's really flexible, and there's no contract. And I always tell them that fit is really important. It's important that you jive with my teaching style. It's important that you don't have to love me, but you shouldn't hate me, right? If you hate me, that's fine, but you probably wouldn't make a good student. I teach shamanism, so if you want to learn Reiki or something else, I'm not your guy. I'm not going to teach you to read tarot cards. I don't know enough about it. So if you want to learn something else, you go to that teacher. Or mediumship. I have friends that teach mediumship. I'm happy to refer people, um, if I can. Or if somebody comes to me and they're like, I'm really interested in Celtic shamanism. Well, I don't know enough about Celtic shamanism to teach it. I don't know enough that I feel like I could teach that, and, I feel like to teach something, I need to understand it inside and out, not just have a passing knowledge of it, or something I need to practice regularly. So, I'll find somebody for you who can teach you some Celtic shamanism, but it won't be me. So fit is really, really important. Oh, yeah, yeah. Everyone I know thinks they're crazy. Yeah, they're what we refer to as muggles from the Harry Potter book. Circle's getting smaller. Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting. Most people who know me, know what I do, know that I practice shamanism. I don't talk about it with people who aren't open to it. So I have lots of sort of circles of friends. So, for example, I have a friend who trained in martial arts with me, who's a stand-up comedian. I've been to a couple of his shows. Um, you know, we hang out. We would talk about martial arts, or we would talk about comedy, or something. I probably wouldn't talk to him about shamanism. He's not interested in it, and it's not his path. um if people are really interested, I've had people ask me, not just from an intellectual perspective, not they're interested in studying, but like, okay, what does it mean that you practice shamanism? And I'll explain it. But I'm careful about what I disclose to people and what I talk about, because yeah, there are going to be people out there who think I'm crazy. And I am a little bit, but not, there are things that I have seen, witnessed, that I'm not the only witness to. There are things that I could describe. I've described to people I know who are therapists, and have said, "You're going to think I've had a psychotic break, but I swear to you, I was in a room with 20 other people and we all saw the same thing happen." So I'm not the only one who experienced this. And I have experienced some um, crazy paranormal activity, like stuff. Going on a little bit of a tangent, but I went on a radio show one time with a group of paranormal investigators out of Pittsburgh. Interviewed me over Zoom on they have a radio show, and talking about my experience with the paranormal. And I'm like, in my line of work, the paranormal is really kind of normal, right? Which I think you're kind of experiencing, where um, you're you see and have, talk to spirits, or you experience spirits. And um the activity around me, like, is, like poltergeist activity, not just that, but like really crazy things. And I've had, you know so I was talking to these these people, and they described a particular incident that happened, that was witnessed by this was an incident that happened that was witnessed by 20 people, that I was in a room with. An object of mine, started. It was my shamanic rattle, actually, the rattle that I use, which I think is on my doesn't matter. It's not in front of me at the moment. My shamanic rattle was sitting on the floor and started shaking on its own and making a lot of noise. And there were 20 people in the room, and they all saw it. They all witnessed it. The woman next to me freaked out. The teacher who was in the room, not my main shamanic teacher, a different teacher, it was part of a class. And I'd been describing to her paranormal activity, and she said, "I don't know if that's really happening, or if there are coincidences or whatever." And after that, she's like, "Okay, you are definitely there's a lot of activity around you." So I described that story in some detail, and some of the other things that had happened to me on this radio show. And these the people who are paranormal investigators are like, "Oh my god, that's so scary." And I'm like, "What do you mean that's scary? Like, don't you guys you guys go looking for this stuff? You investigated." I thought it was funny. Like, to me, it was hilarious because this teacher was not necessarily believing me. Um, and then it happened right in front of her in a really dramatic way. And I was just like, I don't know, maybe I had a little bit of the "I told you so" energy coming through. I was joking with my girlfriend last night. We had some plants coming up in our flower bed, and she's like, "I think these are weeds." And I said, "No, I think these are flowers. I think they're wildflowers that are coming through. It's odd because, it's a patch where I planted a whole bunch of wildflowers years ago, and I never quite know what's going to come up from year to year." Um, and she's like, "No, I think these are weeds. We should pull them out." I'm like, "Well, let's wait a little bit and see if they bloom into flowers." And yesterday I came home and from running an errand, and one of them is budding and about to pop open as a purple flower. And I used an app on my phone to determine what type of flower it was, and said, "Hey, that thing you told me was a weed is about to bloom into a purple flower." And she said, she goes, We're joking around, she's saying, I don't really love it that you're telling me that I was wrong." And I said, I'm like, "It's not so much about that you were wrong. It's more important that I was right." And we both had a laugh about that. Um, but yeah, so there was a little bit of satisfaction in that moment with this particular teacher, where she finally had to admit that I was right. Uh, that I wasn't hallucinating all of these things going on in my life. Um, so I've had lots of experiences with other people around that. Really funny, freaky paranormal stuff. I've never felt, except for one experience that I had with my family. I never had anything that I felt was harmful happen. I've had some annoying stuff happen for sure, but nothing absolutely harmful. So anyway, I've gone off topic quite a bit. That's pretty normal for me. I've got ADHD, for real. I actually have a diagnosis of ADHD. I'm not just someone who says that. It's a real thing, and sometimes it makes me go off on tangents. That's part of my style, I guess. Um, anyway, I've been talking for, gosh, well over an hour. I gotta wrap this up. I do want to thank all of you for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for your contributions. Even if you have questions, if you just have a comment to make, I always learn something. I always, oh yeah, have a great Friday. Have a great Friday as well, everybody. And if you're watching the replay on this, it might not be Friday, but right now it's Friday. Happy Friday. Um, Enjoy your weekend. My girlfriend's daughter's graduating from high school tomorrow. We're having a party for her and going to her graduation. It's very exciting stuff. Um, uh, so anyway, enjoy your day. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate everybody who just tunes in. I appreciate people who contribute, who ask questions. Um, and I hope that you'll join me again. I try to do this at least once a week. Right now, it's pretty much once a week. My student load at the moment is pretty heavy, and my client. Oh yeah, thank you. Uh, Thank you for joining, and thank you for your contribution and allowing us to chat today. Um, I appreciate it, and I learn stuff, and I think other people can learn. It doesn't matter what your experience is. This is part of uh, remaining humble in duality. Is you understand that you can learn from anybody and anything. I can learn something from a blade of grass, even though I learn stuff from my students all the time. It doesn't negate the teaching relationship, trust me. Ego negates the teaching relationship. So it's important to keep that in check, um, I believe, as a teacher. Anyway, enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend. Thank you again for tuning in. I will see